What's up, guys? Welcome back to the pod. It's the what week is it? Week 11 recap, Week 12 preview. As always, if you haven't watched the pod before, we're going to recap the games from last week. Like I said, that we previewed, usually ranked versus ranks. This week's slate is dog shit, but to say the least. But we do have three ranked versus ranked matchups. We do. Since he jumped into the ratings tonight, So it's funny because I was going to give some love to the group of five, but since he actually was ranked, so now it's a ranked versus ranked matchup. So yeah, so we'll get into a few games here later. We'll have our winners and losers of the week, and then at the end, if any of us have any bets that we've made yet, we might say those. But I usually post those, under the comment section or whatever under the video. So let's get right into it. The first game that we previewed last week was OSU at Sparty. I guess I'll just go first real quick. This score was really misleading. I think Buckeye Nation was a little overly excited from what I saw after this game. OSU crushed the field position battle by – it looked like Jim Tressel was coaching again. But, our punter, Drew Crispin, he – absolutely pinned Sparty. I think it was 4 times they started within their own 5. Their starting field position was the 19-yard line, which I actually was surprised it was that good for the game. But my main takeaway was I feel like OSU still struggled to establish the run. Mike Weber did have 100 yards, but OSU only had 3 yards of carry. The defense was in a little bit better position, but Sparty is anemic on offense. They're really bad on offense. I don't really know if OSU really truly was improved on D in this game. But another main takeaway I had, and then Addison, I'll probably turn it to you next since you are an OSU fan. But I felt like the coaching staff finally did something that made sense as far as putting Tate Martell in on short yardage situations. I think that package makes sense since, he puts a lot of pressure on the defense with his running capabilities. But Addison, did you feel like OSU's improved at all to where you feel more confident heading into these last 2 weeks, or do you think the score was a little misleading?
The score was really misleading. The game, for most of it, kind of went how we were saying we thought it would. Just really ugly defensive type game.
Yeah.
Special teams completely won this game for Ohio State. Just you won't see really a much more dominant game from a team in special teams. Michigan State started inside their own 5 5 or 6 times in a row in the second half, and then D'Antonio just pretty much waved the white flag and took a safety. That was ridiculous. He lost his mind there. He was just getting so pissed off about being inside his own 5 so much. And after that, it was vintage Spartying where they always used to just collapse, going back to the days of John L. Smith. But after they took the safety, things really went south for them. They immediately kicked the ball out of bounds, and then we pinned them at the 1-yard line again. And then they fumbled in the end zone, and we scored a touchdown. And they went on to have 3 turnovers in the fourth quarter, all of which led to points, and that's where the game kind of ballooned and kind of became a comfortable win for Ohio State. You're right about the running game, how it still kind of some issues there. But I agree with you. I like seeing Tate. I like that wrinkle. I've wanted to see more of Tate for most of the year, and we'll see what they do with that going forward. I think we could really use him in some of the short yardage situations, just because when we put him in, it completely opened things up for Mike Weber.
Yeah,
and,
it really did.
So Weber had a pretty good fourth quarter. He ended up with over 100 yards. Most of the game, we weren't efficient running the ball, but the fourth quarter was better.
It was, yeah.
So, Drew Chrisman, the punter, was incredible. And so were our gunners, Terry McLaurin and Johnny Dixon. So props to those guys.
Yeah, for sure. Steele, did you have anything to add about that game? I feel like it was covered pretty well, but
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to be too negative.
you can be negative. I mean, we
the
just
neg-
said.
I mean, coming off a win, I don't want to be too negative,
Mm.
but I want to be abundantly clear.
Yeah.
Michigan State's offense is horrendous.
Like horrible.
Not even excluding the factor of starting on your own 5-yard line.
Right.
Obviously, that helps your defense look improved. But if they start on their own 30 or 40, I mean, you might have a different play call, obviously.
Yeah.
Or play set that's called. The worky was inefficient and ineffective in all capacity. They got a couple of long runs with Lombardi coming in, but again, when you're starting on your 5 or worse, you're going to have a tough sled. But like I said, I don't want to be too negative. Obviously, a win's a win, and the possibilities are still ahead of Ohio State with obviously getting the job done with the W.
Mm-hmm.
Touching briefly on D'Antonio's decision to take the safety, I know we had an group conversation during the game where I didn't completely hate it. Obviously, it backfired based on getting pinned again.
Right.
But if that's the way to flip the field and you're only down 3 points, I mean, Sparty was a penalty away from a dumb fat lineman from taking the lead on you.
Yeah. Right.
What was that, in the third quarter?
I wouldn't call him dumb, though. That play was supposed to be a screen.
Sure, whatever.
And then, right. But you're right. Yeah, they were.
I mean, they had, I think it was number 12.
Yeah.
Fooled, and he was biting on that play hard, and the guy was wide open, and then obviously nullified due to penalty. So, again, like you guys said, score was misleading. Defense can obviously play kind of with their ears pinned back based on field position. Your run game is not solved. Also agree with the Tate Martell package, but I would have put the caveat of you better put a pass play or an RPO attachment to it, because
I think he's capable.
Because people have seen it now.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, he's in. They're running zone read or Q draw.
Right.
You better have an adjustment or an addendum to it, because obviously people can scheme to it if you're only running 2 to 3 variations off of it.
Well, and the good thing is that he actually is a quarterback. So I mean, it probably won't be that hard to implement that. But you're right. I think I wouldn't be surprised against Michigan if you might see a little pass from him at some point to try to make something happen in a game that possibly you need to make something happen in. So, we covered that game pretty well. OSU still pretty severely flawed, I think, as far as, comparing them to, the other national contenders. But we'll move on to the next game. Mississippi State at Alabama. Honestly, I have nothing to say about this game. Alabama is really, really good. The only thing that I wanted to ask you guys about, which we talked about this a little bit today, is that I'm surprised that Alabama is actually playing Tua against the Citadel this weekend. I guess I'll go to you, Steele, on this, but because we did talk about this a little bit. My first thought was that he's either not really that hurt or Saban's an idiot, and I don't think Saban should ever be called an idiot. So, should he play in this game if his knee's hurt at all?
Yeah, I told you earlier, I think one series, maybe two, not even a quarter, just so he can go through his game routine, or stretches, work, practices with the ones. Even if those series are 3 straight handoffs for 3 straight touchdowns or whatever it is, less than a quarter he should play just for routine factor. They're 52.5-point favorites. Clearly nobody's, stupid enough to think they're going to lose or anything like that. But to risk injury, I think we all agree now that the drop-off from Tua to Hurts is pretty significant. So to risk that, to have him play more than a quarter would be obviously ignorant. But to touch base on the Mississippi State game, Bama dominant, obviously. I kind of heard the broadcasters actually bring this up, and I thought it was a pretty valid point, where they kind of said, Mississippi State's front is, elite, and, we're a pass-happy team now. People don't think we can run it, or, Bama's changed or whatever. And they came out and just pretty much punched Mississippi State right in the face, and they had no answer for it.
Yep.
And they ran it down their throat.
Which is a scary thing to
see. So Not to get too ahead of myself, but I'm pretty scared for any potential matchups that could possibly be playing out here in the next couple of weeks. We'll see, but it's going to take a couple turnovers, and it's going to take some extraordinary play from anybody in the playoff to compete, let alone beat them.
Well, and maybe in the SEC championship game. We'll talk about that a little bit in a minute here.
Georgia Flights.
So, Addison, do you have anything to add about Bama, Mississippi State?
Bama jumped out to a big lead in the first half and then just kind of coasted the rest of the way. They're reminding people that they still play defense after back-to-back shutouts. I mean, the offenses that they played the last 2 weeks aren't the greatest, but it's still pretty impressive. So, besides that, I don't really have much to add.
I said that week one. I said everybody's enamored with their offense, and just wait till Saban just improves their defense to pair along with it, and they're going to fucking murder everyone they play.
Yeah. Before we move on to the next game, I was going to ask you guys real quick, just because there wasn't really much to talk about with this game. Let's say Alabama plays Clemson looking ahead in the national title game, and let's say Tua did get hurt and Jalen Hurts is starting. What do you guys think that line would be? Do you think it'd be like Pick'em? Like, is he worth 8.5 points?
No, Bama -3 would be my guess.
Okay. Addison, is Bama still a slight favorite over Clemson in the national title if Hurts is starting?
Yeah, I agree with Steele, -3, although I could see it being more than that, too.
Okay, yeah. I agree.
That's where I think it should be.
Right. I was just curious.
I think Clemson is, the way Clemson is playing right now is pretty close.
Okay. All right, so let's move on to the third game. Speaking of Georgia, who we mentioned in a second, we previewed Auburn at Georgia. Georgia won the game pretty comfortably. I believe it was like 28-10. Ended up covering the spread. Georgia had 7.5 yards per play to Auburn's 4.8. We've talked about Auburn quite a few times in this pod as far as they are still struggling to establish the run. Gus, his offense is predicated on them running the football, and they've been really inefficient on offense. Their defense is it's good, but it's tough when you have no offense, essentially. My main takeaway from the game is that Georgia's continuing to look better up front on both sides of the ball. I sense like a change in attitude on that team after the LSU game. I actually think they're starting to play up to their capability. Now, does that mean they can compete with Bama? I don't know. We're going to find that out. But that was my main takeaway. I felt like Georgia's, like I said, their attitude is better. They're more physical. I felt like they dominated a team that a lot of people felt like they could. Addison, I know you had Auburn with the points in that game. Did you have any different thoughts than myself, or what did you think about that game?
Well, I felt good about it early because Auburn was actually playing well for about the first 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And then after that, offensively, things just weren't sustainable for them, and Georgia dominated from then on. Auburn was up 10-6. They kicked a field goal to go up 10-6, and then Georgia went down, scored a touchdown, and then the rest of the game was just pretty much all Auburn punts, and they had a turnover on downs.
Yeah.
So, they went back to not being able to do anything offensively after that.
Right. Steele, any different thoughts on that game? What do you
I didn't watch it, actually. I had Georgia like 12 or 13, and they covered.
Yeah.
But from what Addison said, I kind of checked in on the score and saw Auburn had like 10 early points and then maintained 10 points.
Okay.
So that was
do you think if Georgia continues to play like they are, and let's say, here's the thing. If they don't beat Bama, it's not going to matter, right? They're not getting into the playoff if they don't beat Bama. But if they kept that game within like a single-digit deficit, do you think that a top 4 team is getting left out of the playoff at that point then? Like, are they potentially, could they be better than Michigan and Notre Dame at that point, even with that loss? But I know it's going to be like resume. They won't deserve to get in. But I guess what I'm saying is, like, do you feel like they have the capability of being like a top 3 team that gets left out just because they do have the 2 losses?
So are you asking, do they deserve to be in?
I don't know. How what's your overall take on them? Like, do you think that they
Because
what's their cap? Like, what's their ceiling? Are they better than Michigan and Notre Dame at their best?
well, I always hear it's designed to pick the 4 best teams, and I don't think
That's clearly not the case.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think that is the case.
Right.
Because I think on a neutral field, Georgia would be favored over Notre Dame.
Okay.
Possibly Michigan.
Right.
Maybe even more so than the Notre Dame. I don't know. But with how the SEC's played out this year, I think it's obviously Bama's to lose. I don't think a close loss is going to carry as much weight, only because what they're going up against. Like if there were some, I guess, less contenders,
Right, like less one-loss teams.
or less good teams.
Right.
You could make that argument, kind of like last year.
Right.
But with obviously with the caveat of Notre Dame being in there, who's not a part of the conference.
Yeah.
You're not really anticipating them being undefeated. At the start of the season.
Sure. Well, you predicted it.
Well, yeah, that's right. But I'm talking about it's the playoffs.
Yeah.
The playoff committee's viewpoint. I don't think a small margin loss to Bama somehow gets them.
No, I guess I probably worded it poorly as far as like I just want to see your overall thoughts on that team and if you feel like they are possibly better than even Michigan and Notre Dame with how they're playing. That's hard to say because I think Auburn's pretty. Like, they're not as good as people thought they were going to be. I think we're going to find out about Georgia when they play Alabama. That's all there's to it.
I think you're going to find out a lot about them. So sad for them that they actually have to play them.
Right.
And that matchup's obviously already determined. What's going to throw a wrench into things is if they do pull the upset, which I think they're capable of it. I think they're. Let me rephrase it. I think they're the most capable team of doing it at this point, because I think they've got the offensive power, and they obviously proved that they could play with them last year. I think that even though they lost, was a pretty big building step in stone for Kirby Smart's program just in general. So we'll see. A couple of weeks away from that game.
Right.
It'll be interesting to see what the line is on that. Actually,
I think I've heard like 14 or so. So similar to like what Michigan would be on like a neutral field, I guess. But it's interesting. Yeah, we'll see when we get to that point.
Hey, Nick, one more thing on Georgia.
Yeah.
I'm surprised, actually, I didn't realize this, how efficient they are offensively.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, that must just be because of how they've been playing in, like, the last 3 weeks. Because, I mean, and they don't put up, like, huge scores like some of these other offenses do, but they have been really efficient ever since they lost to LSU. Yeah,
I think what I've been most impressed with, just eye test, is like I said, I think their offensive line, just there was a shift in attitude. They've been running it down teams' throats in teams that have good run defenses. But their defense seems to be – what the fuck was that? Their defense seems to be in a better position now, though, too. Now, like I said, we'll find out more when they play Bama if they're for real. But let's move on to Bedlam. We previewed Oklahoma State at Oklahoma. I actually watched every snap of this game. It was very, very entertaining. Quick little couple stats. OU averaged 9.1 yards per play to Oklahoma State's 7.4.
That's not even close to what Pittsburgh averaged on Virginia Tech.
Well, I was going to get to the winners and losers eventually.
Sorry. Shout out for it.
Yeah, shout out to Pitt. We'll get to that. It's pretty bad. But Oklahoma was +2 in turnover margin. Oklahoma State kicker late in the game missed an extra point, which basically forced Oklahoma State's hand to, as far as deciding to have to go for 2 at the end of the game or to kick the extra point to tie it and to go to overtime. I personally thought Gundy made the right choice being on the road as the underdog. But, Steele, I'll go to you first, I guess. Your takeaway from the game. And I think overall what I'm looking for out of our pod right now is to kind of talk about Oklahoma in a sense as far as, like, how do we feel about them moving forward the rest of the year? Is their defense so bad that maybe we're starting to question them as, like, a national contender?
Yeah, pretty much. I had Oklahoma State in the points.
I think all three of us did.
Almost got the money line win.
Yeah.
Almost got the money line win there.
Sprinkles.
I think Dave from New Orleans tried to make the point that he thought a team like that would be most likely to play with Bama.
Yeah.
I don't agree. I don't agree. I think you're going to have to find stops in some capacity to somehow compete with them, or even Clemson for that matter.
Right.
With how those offenses are clicking, I think Bama would score 60.
Oh, they would. Yeah.
And they might give up 21 or 28, but the game would not be close. They would dominate them, and they would hold them under their season average of points, and they kind of, for lack of a better phrase, choke them out.
Yeah.
And just like suffocate them, with still obviously producing on their offensive side of the ball. They're capable of putting up points on, like I said, on anybody.
Right.
But if you're gonna, no matter what, yield at least 28 or 35 points a game, I don't think you're gonna compete in 2 playoff games against arguably the best 3 defenses, possibly.
Yeah, probably.
I'd have to check the stats in terms of like points per game and stats, but I know obviously Bama and Clemson and Notre Dame are all, I would say, conservatively in the top 20.
Yeah,
Michigan
and Clemson are both top 3.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So if you're telling me that they're going to play back-to-back games and against the elite defenses, which I think we all come from a time where defense is going to win you a championship more than an offense, at least as the saying goes.
Right.
I don't see them. Yeah, I'm sure they're a title contender if you want to put a label on it,
right?
But legitimate contender. I don't put them in my top 4 or 5 in terms of chances to win the title.
Yeah, I think maybe like 3 or 4 weeks ago, I really, really liked Oklahoma. I thought they were a very dangerous team, and not that they still aren't. But Addison, I'll hand it to you. I feel like I finally have seen enough to make me think that their defense is just too much of a liability, and not even. This isn't even talking about them like hypothetically when they're in the playoff. Let's say there's a scenario where it's between them and like Michigan for the 4th spot for some reason. I just feel like the committee is just gonna be like, no, they play 0 defense. Like I think it's gonna cost them potentially as far as if they do get in a situation where there is a choice between them and another 1-loss conference champion. So Addison, how do you feel about what we just talked about in Oklahoma in general?
Well, a lot of agreement with you guys. Every time I see Oklahoma play, I kind of lower them in my own mind compared to the other contenders. Like the defense is just it's too bad for me to really think of them as a national title team. I think that if they just were able to play defense at a top 30 level or something like that, that'd be good enough. But they're
top 50.
Efficiency-wise, they're 67th.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised they're even that high.
I am too.
They can't, when they play a good team, like they're going to give up 40 plus. It's like a guarantee.
Right. If I put a gun to your head right now,
don't do it.
I won't do it, but I'm going to do it in this hypothetical. Who's better, Oklahoma or West Virginia?
Yeah, I was thinking about that before this.
Are they going to play back-to-back weeks?
They might. We discussed that last week on the pod. Yeah,
I like that.
Yeah.
So right now, I would favor, and this is going to be in Morgantown.
Yeah.
I would definitely favor West Virginia, and probably on a neutral field, I would still favor West Virginia.
I do too, because I think West Virginia, when I've looked at their games and looked at their metrics a little bit, they actually play a little bit of defense. It's not a lot, but it's like we talked about with Oklahoma. If they can be just even top 50, they probably have a good shot. And I do favor West Virginia now, and I think that. Like I said, Oklahoma, I think we all can agree, Oklahoma's very dangerous. They probably could beat really anybody on any given day, but even if they score 42 against Alabama, Alabama's going to score 63. So...
Yeah. The thing is, I mean, Oklahoma could always get into a game like last year's Rose Bowl where it's just like a ridiculous shootout. They're always capable of doing that.
Right.
But everyone is going to score on them. And if whoever they're playing gets some stops, which I assume they're going to when they play some good defenses, they're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, Oklahoma State had, even though this game was 48-47 or whatever it was, Oklahoma State actually had a stretch of time in this game where they actually did get some stops. And if Oklahoma State's doing that, then Alabama and Clemson and Michigan and Notre Dame are going to be capable of doing that. So I think this podcast clearly is we've definitely lowered Oklahoma like in our general power ratings. Interesting now that it seems like we tend to think West Virginia might be the best team in that conference, but we're going to find that out in 2 weeks in Morgantown, and we might find it out back-to-back weeks where they might cancel each other out of the playoffs.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Right. Last game, complete joke. Clemson played at Boston College. This is personally one of my more confident bets of the week. Boston College averaged 2 yards per play in this game.
Not good.
They had 24 yards at halftime, and they finished with 9 total rushing yards. BC's only score of the game was a punt return. Clemson really should have won this game by more than 20 points, but, I mean, guys, honestly, I don't really have a whole lot to say about this. We know that Clemson's playing really good ball right now. I fully expect them to finish undefeated and go into the playoff. Steele, I'll hand it to you. Do you have anything to say about this game or anything about Clemson in general?
No, Boston College sucks.
Boston College is trash. Addison, anything to say about this game or Clemson?
Just total domination.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay, so let's move on then. Wow, Boston College sucks. So let's move on to our winners and losers segment before we get into the Week 12 preview.
I feel like there are a lot of losers this week.
There's always a lot of losers. Addison, are you ready? And then I can go to Steele after that if he's good to go. Or Addison, go ahead if you have your winners and your losers.
All right. Well, I know we definitely have a unanimous loser, I'm sure. So I'll let you guys mention them. But so my biggest losers, a couple of coaches. Bobby Petrino, he finally got fired.
Fuck out.
Louisville has just been terrible this season. And Clay Helton.
Your boy.
The loss that they had this past Saturday should be the nail in the coffin to get rid of him. So, USC's had a pretty dismal season.
Yeah.
Big winners. Northwestern wrapped up the Big West championship. It's going to be really exciting to see the Purple Cats in the Big Ten championship game.
Yeah. By exciting, you mean defensive football?
They went 0-3 out of conference, and they're going to the Big Ten championship.
Big Ten's the lead,
including a loss to Akron.
They did.
Maction, baby.
Yeah. But like I said at the beginning of the year, they're not good with expectations. So
yeah,
what do? They removed all those expectations by sucking early, and then all the pressure was off.
Smart. Right. Good coaching.
They'll get a shot, possibly.
Very smart, very savvy of them.
They're going to get a shot to revenge the Michigan loss.
Well, hey, if they were to win the Big Ten championship, they get to go to the Rose Bowl as the Big Ten's representative.
Yeah.
So
there is the possibility of having the shittiest Rose Bowl in history this year.
Addison, what's the line going to be for Washington State Northwestern Rose Bowl?
What if
And how fast are you going to book the Purple Cats, and how fast am I going to book the Cuse?
Yeah. Northwestern can only beat Big Ten teams this year.
We're going to have a major side bet if that's the matchup.
What if Herm gets to the Pac-12 championship and somehow wins, and then it's Herm versus the Purple Cats?
Ooh, that's good. That's old school.
That'd be quite the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, I don't even know what to say about that.
I hope it's Pirate versus Northwestern.
Yeah. All right. So Addison had some.
I got one more.
Oh, go for it. Yeah.
One more winner.
Sure.
The USC fans, because
UCF.
assuming that Clay Helton ends up getting fired, I think
USC.
a lot of them are going to be happy about that. I think they're a little worried about Clay Helton accidentally winning the Pac-12, and then they have to keep him. So that's not a possibility anymore.
Do they have to?
They wouldn't have to, but
They might.
I think Steele wants him to stick around as a Notre Dame fan, but
I'm hopeful he's gonna get an
I'll
extension.
never. I don't know if we did a pod or I'll never forget when USC. What the hell is going on in his end?
Addison, you okay?
Wait, what?
A lot of shuffling going on your end of the noise phone.
Oh, I didn't know.
You're good now. You're good now. No, yeah. When USC gave Clay Helton they took the interim tag away, Steele instantly said, "That's the best thing that's ever happened at Notre Dame."
Great hire.
Yeah.
What's your red side?
All right. So
Addison, it sounds like you're ruffling through like chemistry papers.
it's really weird. Yeah. Stop moving, basically. Stop breathing. So Steele, winners and losers. Jesus Christ, this is
Addison, we're about
distracting.
to hang up on you. Loser, easily Virginia Tech defense. Gave up 14 yards a play.
14 yards per play was the most
Ever?
like it's astronomically like terrible.
Yeah. So the wheels have officially fallen off the quote
Bud
good
Foster
win
is
for Notre Dame.
dead.
Yeah.
He's dead.
So that would be a loser. Winner, I think you got to give a shout out to the OSU punter.
Chrisman, exactly.
For his performance. I think he single-handedly assisted in winning you the game.
Right.
That'd probably be it, really.
Okay. Yeah.
Kentucky football, you suck again.
Yeah. Kentucky had a good run of winners. They were tied for the record or had the record.
They lost to the Balls.
Yeah, that's over with.
So
I have Balls, sprinkles, Ian points, no big deal.
So you're back onto the. Yeah, they were my only lost bet this weekend. So you're definitely on the loser list.
Yeah. You can't be losing for the pod.
It's officially basketball season.
Right.
I guess, until you get beat by 30.
They already did.
Yeah. Right.
So I'll go to my winners and losers, and then I think I actually have some from Dave from New Orleans. He might have mentioned Chrisman and the punter for OSU, but I had two winners. I had Ryquell Armstead. He is Temple's running back. He had 210 yards, which college backs sometimes get 200 yards, but he had 6 rushing touchdowns. That's a lot of touchdowns. Now, Houston's defense is pretty atrocious. That was one of my lost bets. But Addison, on the flip side of the USC loser loss, Cal football with their first win over USC in 15 years.
Wow.
I like where
since Aaron Rodgers, right?
Yeah, I like where their program is actually headed. I think Wilcox is a good coach. I'm not saying they're going to be a consistent Pac-12 contender, but I wouldn't be surprised if they start to become more relevant in the next few years. But my losers, Virginia Tech defense was an easy one. I just said their defense and Oklahoma's defense in general, they're both atrocious. Virginia Tech's defense, look, Corey from Denver, this is a bad year for him as far as Virginia. 2 weeks ago, they gave up 400-plus rushing yards to Georgia Tech, which you're like, okay, Georgia Tech's a triple option team. They run the football a lot. Pitt, then this last weekend, another 400-plus rushing yards on the ground. 400 yards. Bud Foster's
That's
dead.
mind-blowing.
Yeah, Bud Foster.
And just to put the exclamation mark on how bad Virginia Tech was.
Right.
Pitt's top 2 leading rushers in the game, 16 carries for 235 yards, 7 carries for 186 yards.
Is that good?
What are we doing?
Just ridiculous.
Yeah.
I think Corey's starting to sell Justin Fuente's stock.
Yeah, he's definitely. I don't know. We'll see with them. Next year is a very key year for Fuente. It's his last chance, I think. But Dave from New Orleans, real quick. He has Syracuse as winner. He said we have seen a few fraudulent teams from the ACC that have tried to challenge Clemson, but it was Syracuse that has the one legit team. I think they can score with anyone, and I like them to play Notre Dame close. That we'll talk about that game in a few minutes here. He also had Drew Chrisman, loser. He said the SEC pre-rivalry week slate is already my loser for next week. That's how much I hate it. But he said his big loser would be USC. They're pretty terrible. Addison, alluded to that. So let's move into our Week 12 preview. Like I said, the slate.
The SEC slate is so bad this week that the marquee CBS game is Missouri-Tennessee.
Yeah, see, I didn't even know that SEC teams played each other this week. I thought they all played like dog shit FCS schools, but that's not a good game. So yeah, whatever. This slate clearly sucks. But we do have 3 first ranked opponents. So Steele, I will hand it to you right away. We have Notre Dame playing Syracuse in Yankee Stadium. Notre Dame will be wearing really stupid baseball jerseys, I think, but Notre Dame's favored by 9.5 right now. Steele, your thoughts as the Notre Dame expert and fan. Does Syracuse have a chance in this game? Your lean, obviously, as far as against the number.
I'm ready.
Go for it.
I'm ready for the hyped matchup with the Cuse. The Scaracuse, as I'm calling them.
Stop it.
So their numbers are kind of weird. They're really good defensively on third down, but they're also pretty bad against the run.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be interesting. I think third down conversions is going to be key for Notre Dame to stay on the field. I think if they commit to the run, Book is obviously back at quarterback, healthy again.
Which is huge.
Yeah, obviously. I think Wimbush played okay in the first half against Florida State, but again, that's
he did
Florida
what
State.
he needed to do, yeah.
Right. But some of the lingering issues are still there for him. So, actually, it's kind of funny that if like Book were to like re-injure or re-aggravate against Syracuse, I wouldn't be tremendously scared to bring Wimbush in, only because of his running capabilities and how bad Syracuse is against the run.
Yeah.
So like in terms of matchup, it wouldn't like petrify me if Book like re-aggravated something.
Okay.
But I think if they commit to running Dexter Williams and they can complete some third and manageables for the offense, and stay on the field a little bit longer, I don't think the pace of play is that scary. They've seen that before with Wake Forest, who runs a really quick pace of plays per game.
Sure.
The scariest thing to me would probably be just Dungy's ability to improvise. He's kind of a bigger quarterback, and he's got that capability of running. So I think linebacker play from a defensive standpoint for Notre Dame is going to be huge. They've got the athleticism to stay with them with Tranquil, Coney, Nazmar Bilal. He's set. So I don't think they've got to make any adjustments in terms of put in a faster player to spy him or anything like that. The cornerback position, nickel specifically, is going to be huge because they're going to try to pass it a lot. D-line is going to wreak havoc again, I believe, even though Syracuse has a pretty quality line. Be interested to see how Notre Dame attacks offensively. Like I said, I hope they commit to the run just because Cuse in the numbers isn't very good against the run, but their linebackers are kind of young. And I think a lot of what Notre Dame can do in the pass game is, that play action, quick pass to the tight end or, quick slants to kind of expose those linebackers with Book's passing capabilities. I'm pretty confident in the win. I'm also pretty confident that they cover because I still think their defense is their liability, where I don't think Syracuse has played any legitimate defenses except for Clemson. And that game was tight, but again, the game was tight because of the quarterback situation that Clemson had going on. It was kind of a wonky situation. Yeah. So I think Notre Dame's going to win by 14 to 21 points. Wouldn't be shocked if it's close throughout, but like I said, if they run the ball, that offensive line I think has improved greatly, especially after the loss of Alex Bars. People kind of put the panic mode on where they had to put a true sophomore in at left guard and kind of shuffle things around. But I know it was against Florida State, but they looked dominant on the line, pushing them around. Most nervous person this weekend, I would say, is the AD for Notre Dame, who stupidly, in my opinion, moved the game from a home game at Notre Dame to Yankee Stadium. And you hit the nail on the head with the jerseys. They're going to be really ugly, even uglier than the green ones they had on last weekend. Yeah. But from all, probability predictors and all those good equations, if they get the win this week, it's shaping up to be a playoff berth for them because, looking forward to next week at USC, that's kind of
they're going to stomp USC.
A car with no wheels, so to speak. So,
it's good.
So we'll see how it plays out. But 2:30 kickoff, all eyes I would anticipate being on this game because it's probably the best matchup there is. Be interested to see the kicking game also because it's in a baseball stadium. It's kind of weird, and the kickoff team or kickoff kicker specifically hasn't been good no matter who they've put there pretty much all year. So not giving Syracuse tremendous field position to start or even giving up points, God forbid, on the kickoff, limiting that kind of stuff is going to be key, but I think they're going to get the W.
Okay, so I'm going to go next because if Addison does have different thoughts, then I guess he should be last. But I think everything you said is almost exactly how I feel about this game. I question if Syracuse can stop Notre Dame's offense at all. When I looked into Syracuse defense, like you said, on third down, they've been pretty good. That's because they're a really good blitzing team, what I realized. But Notre Dame, we've talked about in this pod when we talk about the schematics of football and stuff, is that when teams are really good blitzing teams, and I don't exactly know how frequently Syracuse is bringing the heat, but it seems like it's enough that they feel like they need to use it. Notre Dame is a very good running football team, though. They're a very good screen team. They're a good short passing team. All that stuff is what usually counters a blitz. So I really question. Syracuse has been, like Steele said, pretty much below average as far as rush D efficiency. They're giving up a lot of explosive plays on the ground. I expect Dexter Williams to have a huge game. As far as flipping to the other side of the ball, I question Syracuse's ability to run it effectively enough to not put it all on Dungy's shoulders. But I think Steele nailed it. I mean, the preview is pretty spot on. I also agree. I think Notre Dame, this line is off by about 5 points to me, so I actually took Notre Dame already. I think Notre Dame does win this game by between 14 and 21 points as well. Addison, do you have different thoughts? Do you lean the other way, or what do you think about this game?
Well, Syracuse is definitely a weird team statistically. They're not particularly efficient on either side of the ball. But what's weird is they average 42 points a game.
Right.
And, they've been putting up a lot of points. They give up a lot of points too. They give up 30 a game. The way they're able to score so many points though is they get turnovers. They play really good special teams. And they, I think, are number one in the country in field position. So they're kind of an opportunistic team. On paper, they're definitely not as good as Notre Dame. So I think if Notre Dame plays a clean game, then they'll win. But if they give Syracuse any chances, turning it over, whatever, then Syracuse has a shot. Besides that, it'll be interesting to see Syracuse if their special teams. Usually they're playing in domes a lot of the time, so outside in November, will they still be able to get good play from that? That'll be key. So I don't really have that strong of thoughts on the line. If I had to pick something, I would probably say Syracuse. Kind of just because I hope they win. But, I don't know. Okay. This game is we're running out of chances for chaos. So people rooting for chaos, this is one of the
it's not
chances,
happening.
I guess, because I don't see Clemson losing or Bama losing.
Notre Dame's not losing to USC. That's not going to happen.
It's not happening with the Citadel, is what he said.
Yeah, pretty much. The Citadels are not our last hope.
Yeah, I'm also curious to see how the fan distribution is. I think there's a heavy alumni base in New York City itself. Yeah. So I think it'll be pretty heavy for the Irish, especially with just a unique venue with a lot of people going, for that aspect specifically. A lot of money. and Addison, it's a pretty generic and repetitive statement, but obviously the team that wins the turnover battle typically wins the game. So, and as Addison said, Cuse is pretty opportunistic. So if Book doesn't gift them 2+ turnovers, I mean, I can live with the turnover, and I think so can the defense. But like, an actual pick six or giving the Cuse the ball on like the plus 20, is obviously going to help Cuse in a great way. So like I said, I think they come out running quick passes, try to expose the linebackers before they take the deep shots. Because you saw in the Florida State game, like BK and Wimbush, like they didn't, or I guess Chip Long didn't have any issue with calling like huge downfield shots, even like on their side of the 50. And you don't see that as much with Book because he doesn't have the arm for it, which I think can help them because they're not just throwing up jump balls or whatnot. So, like I said, if they get Dexter going in the first quarter, I think it'll open it up for the passing game, and they'll go on from there.
I think part of it that I think Dino seems like a little bit more of like a gambler, or like he's going to kind of go for it in this game. They have nothing to lose, so I question. I don't know how often you're going to be able to actually have the time to take deep shots anyway. I think you're just going to burn them with screens and short passes in the run game. Like
Yeah.
I think there's going to be explosive plays, but it's going to be like yards after the catch, yards after contact type of thing.
Yeah, they played 2 years ago, and that was when Notre Dame was going through their horrendous season, specifically defensively, and
Yeah.
they overhit like in the second quarter.
Yeah.
So I'm not worried about offensive production, especially against their players and their scheme.
Right.
And I think even BK alluded to that in his press conference today, where it's like a lot of the same players, and they actually don't even have the two really good receivers they had when they played from that year or even last year, just due to graduation or whatnot. But he, pointed out that like as a program, Dino Babers has built a pretty, productive one, but
Yeah.
I think the holes are still there, and they haven't filled them,
Right.
Defensively.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I mean, I think we all feel like Notre Dame's going to win the game. I think Steele and I feel more confident about them covering. Addison not with very strong thoughts on the line, but let's move on to a pretty interesting game. Iowa State is at Texas. Texas is 3-point favored right now, I think, in most books. Addison, I'll go to you first. As usual, your thoughts about this game. Which way would you lean? All that good stuff, I guess.
Yeah, this one's kind of under the radar, I feel like, but it's a pretty big game for the Big 12 race. This game and then the Oklahoma-West Virginia game are pretty much going to determine who ends up in the Big 12 championship. The loser in this one's obviously going to be eliminated, and then the winner has a pretty decent shot. It just kind of depends on how things go in the other game, because it'll depend on it'll depend on tiebreakers, because Texas beat Oklahoma beat Iowa State beat West Virginia, and West Virginia beat Texas, so you got that weird transitive thing going there. But Iowa State has been, ever since they lost to TCU, been really good. Both of those teams went completely opposite directions, too, as far as their seasons after that game. Another thing, Iowa State, after that game, they started playing Brock Purdy, the true freshman at quarterback, and he has been huge for their offense. He's having a really good year. And I like David Montgomery, the running back, and Hakeem Butler has been one of my favorite receivers this year. Huge as a deep threat. He's averaging like over 20 yards a catch. He's got great hands, and he's a elite playmaker for them. Texas, as we know, Herman is a lot worse when he's the favorite. He's been almost unbeatable as an underdog, but as a favorite, I don't know what he is against the spread, but I think it's more like a coin flip probably.
I think he's a slight loser, but yeah.
Yeah, a slight loser. Another thing I noticed about Texas this year is they haven't done well defending a lead in the fourth quarter. You look at the Oklahoma game, just how quickly they let a 21-point lead evaporate there. Last week, they let Texas Tech come back from 17 down in the fourth quarter. They just happened to win both of those games. But then you go back a couple weeks ago, they blew the lead to West Virginia late, too. So that's kind of concerning for Texas. If I had to lean one way, I would say Iowa State plus 3, right?
Yep.
I think that's what it is, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I think I actually already booked Iowa State. I think they're a better football team, to be totally honest. When I kind of went through Texas' schedule, you kind of alluded to some of those games where they gave up some fourth quarter leads. But, when I dug into the game last weekend, even though they blew like a 2-possession lead or whatever it was, I actually felt like Texas Tech outplayed them. I felt like Oklahoma outplayed them. As you said, Herman is definitely worse as a favorite. Small little tidbit here, which I think could matter in a game that's apparently where there's not much of an edge with either team, is that Herman's got possibly some distracting stuff going on with the whole Zach Smith Twitter meltdown, and we don't know. Yeah, cool, hook 'em, but we don't know how that's affecting Herman in his home life. I just think that stuff can't be. I don't think we should overestimate it, but at the same time, I'm not going to underestimate it when a game's this close of a spread. And
hard to quantify, but definitely not something to be overlooked.
Right, just to brush it aside. So, a couple interesting thoughts I had about this game. David Montgomery, as you alluded to, Addison, he is suspended for the first half in this game for the brawl that they got into with Baylor last weekend.
I forgot about that.
Yeah,
That's
it sucks a little for me being an Iowa State backer, but I think, as you said, Brock Purdy's been really good for Iowa State. They are creating explosive plays vertically down the field. Texas has been, as far as defending against that type of a strategy, they haven't been too good. They've been giving up a lot of explosive plays. So one interesting note I also had was that Sam Ehlinger's had 280 straight attempts without an interception. Iowa State is not quite as opportunistic on defense, but if he can remain mistake-free, and if they can take advantage of Montgomery being out, then I could see them building a lead. But then, like we said, do they hold it? I think Matt Campbell I think this is possibly his last year in Ames, and I do think that Iowa State is actually the better football team, though. So I think they win the game on the field and make things a little bit interesting in this Big 12 race. But still, obviously, your remaining thoughts or
I don't have much to add besides that. I think this could be a pretty big audition, or I guess a continuing audition for Matt Campbell for bigger and better things. Possibly right. Columbus, Francis.
I don't think so, but yeah, it's possible. Yeah.
So we'll see how he handles, I guess, the publicity, and I think it's inevitable that his name will be out there for. I think it's already on the Cleveland Browns coaching list.
Yeah.
Searched. I mean, it would be a pretty crazy jump from Ames to Cleveland in terms of notoriety. So we'll see if that happens or something else pops open in terms of the college landscape. But in terms of on the field game action, I'd probably lean Iowa State as well. Just from what I've seen from both teams, I think they're possibly the better team, and like we always say, take the better team and the points.
Yeah. Okay, so last game, I'm not sure how much we'll have to say about it, but it's technically ranked versus ranked. We're going to give the group of 5 a little bit of love. Steele, I'll start with you. Your Bearcats, even though I know it's more of a basketball thing.
Bearcats.
The Bearcats, the Black Cats as we like to call them, they are at Central Florida. They are getting 7.5 points, I believe, right now.
Really, that much?
Cincy has been playing really good defense under Luke Fickell this year. UCF is clearly known for their offense. Their defense is atrocious. I guess my main question, we'll see if Steele has other thoughts about the game, but is UC going to get exposed by a legit offense, or is it the other way around where we think that UCF just really hasn't played a legit defense, and maybe this is where they finally get exposed over the last couple of years. Because I don't know about you guys, I do not count the Auburn game as like this win that proves anything, and this is my theory on it, is that Auburn had everything to play for at the end of the year, and by losing to Georgia the way they did in the SEC championship game, I felt like those kids just didn't give a shit about having to play UCF in some exhibition bowl game, even if it was a New Year's Six bowl. I felt like that was UCF's biggest game in the history of their program. So I'm not surprised that UCF won the game. And I'm not saying that this team doesn't have talent, but I've seen enough to where I feel like their defense is so bad, and UC's defense is so good that I guess I'm going first. Apparently, I would lean UC in the points. I think they can play with UCF, but still, sorry, I'll let you go now and your thoughts. I just hijacked the shit out of it.
Stole all my thunder.
Yeah.
So you said it.
Sorry.
UC has played improved D under Fickle for sure, especially this year, from years past, and I think they'll probably almost have like a bend but don't break mentality, but I don't think that's the type of style that's going to beat UCF, because I think that offense is legitimate, and in terms of scoring points and production, I think to beat them you're going to have to outscore them, obviously. I don't think it's a team that you're going to try to just contain to like 21 points or less, or obviously that'll be their mindset. But so all that being said, I think you'll see a close game, and it'd actually be probably a game that I would look at Cincinnati at maybe like the first quarter or first half bet.
Okay.
But I think UCF, just with their explosive talent, they probably break away late.
Okay.
That's pretty much all you got to say, because they're not making the playoffs.
Yeah, and I actually have a question about that coming up, which I think we might get quick answers. But Addison, your thoughts on UC at UCF?
Well, Ohio State fans, I think, miss Luke Fickell as a defensive coach, last couple of years. So it'll be interesting. This is a huge game for Cincinnati's program. But I would go with UCF here.
Okay.
Without having seen very much of either team. I don't know. UCF is obviously more proven. I mean, Cincinnati, I don't really know who they've beaten this year. I mean, UCF hasn't really beaten anyone either, but they've won, 20 games in a row or something?
Yeah.
Defending national champs.
Clearly.
Yeah. So, I mean, since he beat UCLA, or whatever that's worth.
Right.
Tons.
And so, I don't really know what else. I just don't know how good Cincy is, I guess.
Yeah.
At 9-1, are they really that good, or is it just they've beaten a bunch of not great teams? So
yeah, I think the one thing going for them is they've controlled the games within the conference, and they've been pretty dominant, even if it is against not as good of competition. I do think, from what I've seen from a couple of their games, is I think they'll be in position to slow UCF down a little bit. Now, is Cincy going to be able to score enough? Their offense isn't overly efficient or explosive. It's pretty average to below average in some aspects, but at the same time, UCF's defense is absolutely atrocious. Something's going to have to give there, and like you said, Addison, this is a huge game for Fickell and the program, because if they win that game, we're talking about them as like the Group of Fives representative for the New Year's Six Bowl, and that's obviously a big deal for them. So, as far as UCF though, let's say they wipe the floor with Cincy, and we get all these people talking about UCF being like a playoff contender, or should they be a playoff contender? Can they really play with these other teams that we've been talking about all year? Like, Steele, I'll start with you. Can UCF beat a team like Notre Dame? Are they competitive with those kinds of teams?
Maybe Notre Dame.
Okay, but
maybe Notre Dame, but not Georgia.
Okay.
Not Bama.
I think I saw books hypothetically have Bama as a 35-point favorite against UCF if they were to play them.
Maybe I'm not buying into Notre Dame just because I'm pessimistic for their November run here, but I think they could beat Notre Dame. I think, quite frankly,
You think so?
I think they could.
I don't think they can.
I don't think they could. I don't think they could beat Georgia or Bama,
Okay.
or Oklahoma, or I think they could probably play with Michigan too.
Could they beat the Purple Cats?
Barely.
Yeah.
By a field goal.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're not a contender, and I'm sorry.
Should they get consideration for the playoff?
No, you need to play someone outside of your shitty conference to begin with.
Right.
And I understand schedules are made far in advance, but you had 2 really good seasons, no.
Okay.
No.
So, yeah, here's the problem for UCF. You can't beat UCF and schedule South Carolina State and then say that you should be in the playoff.
I'll play a little bit of devil's advocate. I totally agree with you guys that they have to play teams, but there have been some pretty notable Power 5 teams that have backed out of games with them recently. Addison, do you think, so if UCF can't get in with how their schedule is now, what kind of schedule, as far as it's obviously the out of conference is what matters for them. Do they need to seriously play Notre Dame and Auburn in the same year and beat both those teams or one of them to have a chance? Is that are we saying that they need to schedule 2 juggernauts basically, or can they get away with scheduling Georgia for a home and home or a neutral site game, and if they won that one game would they get serious consideration? What do you guys think about that? Is it a one-game thing? Do they need to schedule multiple juggernauts? Or do they need to just simply not schedule, Addison said, the Citadel or something, and schedule, maybe Minnesota and Georgia? Is that, what it would take?
Yeah, they need to beat a legitimate
bona fide team.
Power 5 conference team.
Okay.
If they went to Boise State this year and, beat them by 14, would that put them in the playoff? No, but at least they would bring them to the table. Because Boise State's a quality program.
Right.
They've proven that they can do it before, and Boise State, specifically to this year, is having a pretty good season.
Right.
But so obviously you're not going to get 2 juggernaut teams to play you in each year, nor does UCF want that, or should they want that. But if they go to 2 Virginia Tech, who again is having a bad season, but typically they're in the top 25,
a decent Power 5 program,
and they beat them, that would give them so much more credibility than just saying we're undefeated.
Right.
I'm sorry, it's just not enough. It's not.
It's not. Yeah.
Unless you're hanging your hat on the possibility that every team besides Bama has 2 games,
right?
And that's just
even then, I don't
never
think that's
going to happen.
enough. I just don't think that's enough either. I think 2-loss Big 12 West Virginia champion should be in over UCF at 12-0. That's just my opinion on that. But Addison, do you have any?
They've got a schedule like Boise used to.
Yeah,
it seemed like Boise had a marquee game every year. It seemed like they played Virginia Tech, they played Georgia, they played Oregon, and they beat all of those teams.
Right.
So, and the American Conference is usually, it's not as good as it was last year. Definitely not. But it's usually a pretty solid conference, and it helps when their other conference mates pull some upsets out of conference too. But yeah, they need to schedule some, and it's hard to do. It's hard to get the elite teams on the schedule, but you got to do better than what they've been doing. To their credit, they did smash Pitt this year, but and they had North Carolina on the schedule too. They would win that division of the ACC, but
that's not saying much this year. Yeah, right. They certainly could win the Pac-12 South or possibly even the Big Ten West, but I don't know. I was just curious what you guys thought. I think we generally agree that it's who have you beat, and they haven't proven they've beaten anybody. I don't care how many games in a row they've won. I think we can just accept them for what they are. They're fun to watch, and they're a good story, but when it comes down to it, they don't play national championship level defense, and I think their offense could score some points on some of these teams, but they just certainly don't have the on-field talent that these other teams have. And if somebody wants to tell me, well, how do you know that they haven't played those teams? Well, yeah, they need to fucking play those teams. So, do you guys have any closing thoughts at all?
Go Irish.
Go Irish. Addison, anything else you want to add before we wrap it up?
So on paper, it's not a great slate, but it's the second to last week of the regular season, so always got to enjoy every single weekend of college football, no matter how bad.
Real quick before we wrap it up, I think looking forward to some of our nominees for winners and losers of the year. I can safely say that I think Louisville and FSU are going to be fighting for that loser title.
ACC.
Virginia Tech is possibly a nominee, but Louisville is just completely given up on life. Florida State is absolutely garbage. And then, we've talked briefly on the pod about some winners of the year. I think even though Kentucky has fallen off a little bit here, they're possibly one of them. Cincy could be up there. They had really low expectations. There's a couple other Power 5 teams. But yeah, so next week's slate should be much more entertaining and relevant. There's going to be a lot of rivalry games. I think there's going to be quite a few ranked versus ranked matchups. So
mini previews.
Look forward to that.
Thanksgiving week is one of the best weeks of the year, of course.
Of course.
Bye.
Bye.